Hey, welcome. Happy to serve you today, leader. Welcome, welcome. It is 1 p.m. Central Time here in Texas. I am so excited to join you again for another live leadership training. So, wherever you are, you may be in your office watching this, you may be on your lunch break watching this, you may be in your home office watching this, you may be a hybrid employee. So, you may be at home watching this. Wherever you are welcome to join us every single week because these trainings are dedicated to serving the leader. Because while you're serving others, you're serving your families, you're serving your communities, you're serving your organizations, you're serving so many people. And sometimes you have to stop and ask, well, who's serving me? Because I'm serving a lot of folks. I'm serving the stakeholders. I'm serving the clients. I'm serving my family. I'm serving my employees. Now, can somebody take a moment and serve me, the leader? Well, that's what we do every week. We serve the leader. That is our intention in doing these free live leadership trainings every week. We stream on YouTube, we stream into Facebook, on LinkedIn, and gosh, I think that's it. Not Instagram yet. But we're everywhere. And then we have replays that you can watch wherever you're watching this. But if you want a collection of all of our live leadership training replays, you're going to go to drdenisesimpson.com and find them there. So you can go and consume and apply, consume and learn, consume and put things into practice. That's the point of leadership training and development. You take information, it's knowledge at this time, right? I'm providing knowledge, I'm providing you information, but now you have to go apply it. That's the learning that needs to take place so that you can find these trainings valuable. Like, we just don't want to sit and binge a leadership training and then do nothing about it, right? You take the contents and do nothing with it, then we're not growing and expanding as leaders. And so the point here is to join me every week, take this information and then go apply it in real life in real time. So welcome. I am Denise Simpson. I'm happy to serve you today. I am excited about today's conversation because I had some feedback from some of you regarding our last leadership training session. And it was on the reactive brain of a leader versus a proactive brain of a leader. We looked at the differences between the two leaders and we looked at it through the lens of neuroscience. And so we talked a whole lot about that on last week's training. And you're going to want to go back and watch that if you did not join me live or have not watched the replay. You're going to want that as a great foundation training for what is happening in the brain of a leader when he or she or they are in a reactive mode, when they are reactive because of an uncivil behavior, a disruption in the workplace, which is what led me to today's training on incivility in the workplace. Because when we react, we are startled by the behavior, some of us, right? We are in heated conversations with our teammates, our team members, our direct reports, and then we start feeling agitated, stressed out, uncomfortable. And what I did was explained to you what was happening in their brain at that moment and why taking a proactive leadership approach and preparing and anticipating for some of these uncomfortable conversations is important, and how you can leverage neuroscience so that you can be a more impactful, effective leader. So, your feedback was really great. You said, I need more on neuroscience. Here's what's interesting about who watches these trainings, whether you're on live or you're watching these on replay. You are ready for more. You know that this is valuable. You know that this is an opportunity for you to grow and expand because maybe your organization does not provide professional development. Maybe you aren't able to get coaching, leadership coaching, or professional certifications, right? Perhaps your organization just does not see the value in allotting a budget for you to grow and expand. So you come here to get that need met. And those who are dedicated to being a better leader have said to me, I want more neuroscience. I want more information on how I can leverage this 3-pound organ, this thing that's sitting between my ears. I want to know more about what's happening in my brain so that I can be more effective in real time, in real life. So when I got that feedback from some of you, I said, okay, this is interesting. So my obsession and passion for neuroscience parallels to the obsession and passion for leadership. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. But you all got me thinking. We can design a micro credential program just for the leader who wants to know more about how to leverage their brain and how to use neuroscience to impact their organizations, their movements, their nonprofits, their communities, even their families, or maybe constituents, because we do serve some folks who are serving constituents out here. So you all had me thinking, and so I'm gonna wait to tell you more about what I have coming up for you because this is for a very special group of leaders. It's not just for anybody, what I'm about to share with you. Well, what I will share with you at the end of our time together. But hang tight because that's coming. But let's get back to why neuroscience is one of my greatest passions. Um, so I was a 19-year-old Bath and Body Works retail manager. I know I've said this story many times, and I'm going to keep telling this story because it's a great story. I lived it, I've experienced it, and it was quite fascinating. I was a young manager. I was not trained. There was no formal training for retail management. I mean, I don't know about you all out there, but there's probably not a formal training program for retail managers at all, unless you come into my program and learn about leadership. But they give you the keys to the kingdom and say, okay, go on, let's see what you can do. You work really hard, you're good with customers, you love our products, you can sell like nobody else we know. I bet you'd be a great manager. And I said, okay, yeah, maybe. Okay, well, put me in, let's go. So they give you the keys to the kingdom, and then, you're like, okay, well, now what? Oh, well, now follow what your predecessor or your regional manager has told you to do, and good luck. Right. And so at that time, I was at UTSA. For those of you in San Antonio, that is my alma mater. Love the Roadrunners. I was in undergrad finishing up a bachelor's of business administration, a BBA in leadership and administration. So I've been in leadership for a very long time and have been obsessed with this field. And I was a 19-year-old senior in college, but also running a Bath and Body Works store full time. And at that time, my mom was 47 years old, and this is critical because you're going to need to know why this age is important. Because as I was entering senior year, my mother said to me, "I need to retire." More like I'm being forced out of the hospital. She was a nurse, and she said to me, I'm becoming a liability to this hospital. And I didn't know what she meant. I'm like, "What are you talking about, mom? I'm going into senior year. You need to pay for my tuition. I don't care if you need to retire, blah, blah, blah. What am I going to do?" And I was very selfish, like a self-centered 19-year-old should at that time. Had a lot of ambition and yes, a lot of entitlement at that time. And soon after that we all realized what was happening to my mom and her brain. My mom had a very sharp cognitive decline at the age of 47. For me, it felt like night and day. For me, it felt like from one day to the next, she had lost her memory. But there were so many signs leading up to that. But because I was busy building my career and my life in a whole other city, I did not pay attention to those signs. So, turns out a few years later, we get a diagnosis for her that it was early onset dementia. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. I graduated from UTSA in 1999. Yes, do the math, y'all. You know how old I am today. And so my mother, however, stayed with us until her early 60s, but suffered with Alzheimer's for a very long time. So from 47 through the age of 62 when she passed, she suffered with this brain disorder. And so my fascination for what was happening in the brain began at that age. So when I finally, uh, focused on my mother and her care was when I started to do the research myself because I wanted to better understand what was happening in her brain because no neurologist out there was helping me. They, listen, we needed them to dumb down some things for me because I was young and didn't know what was happening. And they were speaking in these very high level terms and didn't understand. And I needed to understand. And so what I did was I went on my own and did my own research. And I remembered one day, one of the neurologists said to me, "You're asking all these really important questions, really great questions. Are you a doctor or a nurse? How do you know this information?" I said, "I no, but I do my research because none of you out here will take the time to explain to me what's happening to my mother. And so I've had to do this for myself. And in the process of doing that, so that I can better be informed, so I could better be educated in what was happening in her brain, I became fascinated with this field of brain health and neuroscience. It has become one of my greatest obsessions. So I've had a parallel obsession with leadership and this and of course, neuroscience. And so I have these two beautiful disciplines that I'm fascinated by, and I have always integrated this into my work as a consultant, as a leadership coach and an executive coach, and a leadership trainer, and someone who designs evidence-based curriculum for my clients and my students in the Masters of Leadership Institute. So for me, it's like these two worlds have always been there. And now, as I'm receiving your feedback that you also are very interested in what's happening in the brain, I have decided to do something very special for us very soon. So hang tight. We're going to talk more about that. So, that conversation we had last week about the reactive versus the proactive leader's brain was 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 I was going to say the catalyst. The catalyst for that session was the Society of Human Resource Management survey that they conducted on uncivil behavior in the workplace and the rise of incivility. And what are we leaders doing about it? I asked. What are we doing about it? Because we are responsible for the culture that we create in our departments, in our divisions, regions, organizations. We are ultimately responsible. And so I wanted to lead us into this next conversation today. This is the second part to what we learned last week in how I can help leaders like you, like me, like all of us who care. How can leaders model civility by using neuroscience backed strategies? Because we are ultimately the ones responsible for creating the culture of safety, psychological safety in our organizations. We are ultimately responsible for setting the energy, setting the mood, the state in our department meetings. And so it is our responsibility because incivility in the workplace doesn't just hurt feelings. People aren't just hurt. They're not just crying about it. No, there's a financial cost to what is happening when we observe and experience uncivil behaviors in the organization. And so I'm always looking at the financial cost. And coming from consulting, when a CEO says to me, "Well, how are you going to make me money or save me money if I purchase your leadership development and training? How is this going to help us solve these bigger problems? But I want to know financially how you're going to either save me money or make me money." So my brain always goes to, well, what's the financial cost here? What is the burden here? show me in numbers because I'm very interested in learning about this so that I can take this information to a corporate buyer and say, listen, we need to help you all because this is what I have found. And the attrition rate in your organization in particular is higher than others in your industry. And here's what it's costing you every single day, every single year. And here's how it's impacting your bottom line. So not only am I looking at the impact on the individual employee, but I want to tell the CEO how this is financially impacting their organization and their bottom line. And so today's conversation is to help you, leader, because you're ultimately responsible for the behaviors, the impact, the output, the result, the performance of your teams. So wouldn't you want to know how to be better at this? Don't you want to know how to handle these uncivil behaviors as they come up? Of course. And that's why this is part 2 of the conversation that we started last week. So it's important that you go watch that as well. But stick with me here until the end. So something that's interesting after serving so many leaders, it's always a leader comes in with an example. This is what happened today. And this is the behavior that I witnessed, and this is the behavior that impacted the team, and this is how I reacted to the circumstance. And you're always giving me the play by play. And that's important because then we find awareness around what occurred so that you now know how to anticipate and prevent from these behaviors happening again. So that's important. But what happened recently when a client said to me they were unhinged and I felt attacked, and it was not my team, it was my superiors. There were leaders in higher ranks in that room who made me feel a certain way. Well, okay, maybe that's true, but I wasn't there, so I don't know what the facts are. Because when a leader comes and tells me and they're flooded with a lot of emotions and they're flooded with a lot of regret and that emotional hangover that we have after an instance like that, there's a lot of flooding of the amygdala. It's called emotional hijacking, which we talked about that last week. And so when the amygdala is triggered and there's emotional hijacking, the prefrontal cortex cannot be utilized. It can't. And so as you were explaining this to me, I have to set the energy for the session so that we can calm your brain. We can calm your nervous system down because I want to know the facts, not what your brain interpreted, not the memory that it registered. Because sometimes those memories, because they're flooded with so much negative emotion, they're not always accurate. It's not giving me a proper picture. It's giving me a picture of your nervous system, but it's not giving me a proper picture of what actually happened in those meetings. And so when this client said to me, this is how I reacted, and now I feel a lot of regret. And I wish I could have done this differently. And so I asked her, well, how did it start? Like, give me the first instance where you felt uncomfortable. And she said it was just a look. This person gave me a look. And I said, well, describe the look. She said, well, he rolled his eyes at me. And I said, that's considered uncivil behavior. Okay. Tell me more. Then she started to describe his reaction and how he then started to fluff up and started to use colorful language. And then she felt the force coming towards it. Like she needed to bring back the force because the force was on her and she was coming at him with the same amount of energy. And so it's important to understand that because then we know what our triggers are. And so for her, it was the eye roll. And that's just one of many examples of uncivil behavior. How about when you are interrupted in mid sentence? You're trying to make a point and someone goes, hold on. I just said what I said. And now you're saying that, and you're trying to make a point, and it feels very uncomfortable. It feels like, how dare you? Like, let me speak. How about when someone silences you? I've had somebody do that to me. Please. What? Put your finger down. Like I'm grown here. And so it's important that we notice these triggers because those are the signals that send us into these emotional, I call them flare ups. Sure, because that's not normal. That shouldn't happen in the workplace, but it does. Why? Because we spend so much time with our teammates. We spend so much time in this organization. We're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week sometimes. And so, yeah, we are invested in our work. We want to provide the best quality work. And when someone, says something unjust, unfair, we take that personally. It's normal. But here's what's interesting. You're not the only one being impacted in that moment. Your teammates or others in the room are also observing and feeling what you're feeling. This is called mirror neurons. We talked about that last week as well. And so, what if you are a leader of a team who likes to mistreat one another? There, because we're so comfortable with each other now that we just disrespect each other, we cut each other off, we say things to each other, and then we go about our business, then we come back and we're all happy again. But it's doing more harm than good. There's so much more that's happening that we need as leaders, we need to better understand when these moments happen and how we can correct them in the moment. And so this is where you are responsible. And I'm going to show you those neuroscience backed strategies so you can go implement them right away. So let me remind you of some examples of incivility in the workplace. I mentioned the eye roll. That's a big one. I know I've done that many times. How about addressing others disrespectfully? How about interrupting or silencing while others are speaking? How about excessive monitoring or micromanaging? There's a lot of us leaders out here who feel out of control, and the only way we think we can control our employees is by micromanaging them. How about giving dirty looks or negative eye contact? I remember I was doing a training. I was doing the training. I was the trainer, and the leader and his team were my audience. And what was interesting is when he would speak or give an example of what I was sharing, I noticed two of his direct reports looking at each other and dirty looks. Maybe they were looking at each other because they were in on a little secret. And it caught me off guard as the trainer. I'm up there trying to teach some people some things while there's passive aggressive stuff happening in the audience. That's interesting to witness. So, and there was a lot behind those looks that we actually got to the bottom of. But how about making demeaning remarks or emotional put downs? How about sending nasty emails or notes? How about the office gossip? I know a few of those. Yeah, and it is debilitating. It does a lot more harm than good, especially when you're the butt of the joke or you're the butt of the gossip. How about undermining credibility in front of others? So, as leaders, we have either experienced these ourselves or we have been the culprit. We are the ones doing this to our direct reports. And it's important that we define what incivility means. And by the way, I did get a definition for us so that we can better understand this. Workplace incivility refers to low intensity, deviant behavior with ambiguous intent to harm the target, characterized by rude and discourteous actions that display a lack of regard for others. Low intensity, deviant behavior. So I've said this, I said this in our last session together that it can be explicit and it can be implicit, it can be overt, it can be subtle. But uh, when you are the person who is being disrespected or is the target of these rude behaviors. And it's costing us with in many ways, not just the financial ways we're going to talk about in just a moment, but think about when your team this is a normal culture for them. So you're the leader and you've got this team who likes to do this to each other, right? There's moments where, okay, we're challenged, we're heated, and we say things to each other. And just because we walk away and come back feeling happy again and respectful again doesn't mean we did not do any damage. there is stuff happening in the brain and in the body of this team. And it looks like low morale. It can also look like poor performance. It could look like decrease in productivity. And how about high turnover? A lot of my leaders, we talk about attrition a lot because as they come into their new roles as these leaders, they lose a lot of people. Easily they lose people because it's a new leader. They have new way of implementing policy, maybe a new way of leading. Their leadership style is very different than what they were used to. And so some of these folks leave and they blame it on their leader and not getting along with the leader as a reason for leaving. And my all of my research during my doctoral programs were focused on the disengagement of employees and their lack of commitment because of who they reported to. And so remember the leader follower dyad, because we spend so much time together, it's important that we realize they're going to blame us. And sometimes it is your fault that they're leaving, right? Because you weren't the best, most effective leader and they needed somebody else, whatever. But the point I'm making here is that we leaders need to better understand that attrition is going to happen, but don't let it be because of incivility in the workplace. Don't let it be because you weren't able to manage these situations. This is your job. This is your responsibility. And so this is why this session is important so that you can go implement these 3 neuroscience backed strategies so that you can be the model of civility in the workplace. And so I want to point out what that looks like in the workplace. So if you're asking, well, what is incivility? What does that even mean? Yes, you do, because we have all experienced these kinds of behaviors. And so great impact is happening either to the individual or to the organization. And it's costing our organizations a whole lot of money. The turnover rates itself, I mean, there's some reports that show, especially at the executive level, 2 times their salary to replace that person. That's how much it'll cost when turnover occurs at that high level of leadership. How about absenteeism? The cost of absenteeism in your organization. Sometimes it's 2.5 days work when one person does not show up for work because of lost work time, because of uncivil behavior. Right? How many of us are like, I'm just burnt out. I'm tired of being the butt of the joke. I'm tired of being challenged every day. I'm just not even going to come in today. Right? There's a heated argument the day before with your team, and then the next day, 2 people call in sick. And so we have to start looking at the financial ramifications of incivility in the workplace, not just what's happening to the individual themselves, but what's happening in the organization and how this is impacting our organizations financially. So I bring this up because we need to be responsible leaders. We can't just be showing up and faking it until we make it, which a lot of leaders tell me that's what they do because we don't have the leadership development and training opportunities. So this is why this is important that you join me every single week to do this. So let's get started right away on the leadership principle number 1. This is the first one I always bring up because this is the one that puts all the responsibility on you. Remember, these are neuroscience backed strategies. Here's the first one: regulating your own emotional responses. You leader, you have to set the energy and the tone for the meeting. I always think of a leader as the safety net. And I think about a tightrope, and your team is crossing that tightrope every day. They have to balance out all their duties. Sometimes there's risk that they're unwilling to take. Some are risk averse. Some are risk tolerant. They're all very different people on your team. So you as a leader, you got to be under there. You're the net. You're the safety net. So while they're up there doing their tightroping, you're the safety net so that they can count on you, so that they know I'm going to walk that tightrope again today. It's a new project, new skills. I have a lot of gaps. But I know my leader is going to be there to catch me because I trust him, her, they. I trust them so much that I know they're good for this. So that's the anchoring that I want for you to have in your body, in your nervous system. So that's why you come to me or to any other leadership coach and you discuss all your concerns in private. But when you're in public with them, you are the safety net. They can count on you. They know you are good for protecting them and keeping them safe so that they can go and explore their geniuses, use their expertise. You want to create a culture of psychological safety, which is number 3. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But that's your responsibility. But what if you, leader, what if you're the one that's unhinged? Because a lot of us are under so much pressure that we quickly go into stress mode. We quickly turn off our prefrontal cortex and the amygdala hijacks the brain. Let's be truthful. I mean, let's be honest here because that's happened to me many, many, many times and still does today when I'm being pushed or when there's so much pressure on me. There's some of us have breaking points. We're on the verge of breaking right now because of how much stress we're under in the organization. And so because you're under so much stress, you're the one that's not regulating your emotional responses, and it is your responsibility to do that. So how are you going to be somebody else's safety net if you don't have that safety net for yourself? And that's why we created Amplify Leadership. This is why I do what I do, because I am the safety net for my leaders. Because while you're serving the world, while you're serving your constituents, while you're serving your teams and your people, I'm serving you. Because you need to go into these workplaces and you need to be the safety net for this team. So while they're on that tightrope and they're worried, right? I mean, think about when you are an employee, but think about when you weren't a leader and you had leaders that you couldn't rely on. How effective were you in your role? Not very, probably. Maybe not very. So this is where it's your responsibility to now be the leader that you didn't have. And that's why this first neuroscience leadership principle is so important. It's your responsibility to regulate your own emotional responses. So the second one, let's move into the second one. Okay, I'm going to get some heat for this one. You're going to practice compassion, not empathy. You're going to practice compassion, not empathy. I put that in parentheses, not empathy. Difference between these two. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment. And if you disagree with me, great. I love a disagreement. And you're going to practice active listening here. So compassion and active listening go hand in hand with this second principle. So first, let's talk about active listening, because many of us leaders think we're great listeners, but in reality, we're just listening to then respond, like listening to pounce on what they just said, listening so we can react right away. It's like, no, hold on. There's more to active listening. It is a skill set. This is something we must develop as leaders. Active listening is a skill that can be developed. And many of us think that we are, and we're not great listeners. Now, here's why compassion is going to be important to help you be a better listener, a more active listener. Now, let's talk a little bit about empathy and why I do not agree with empathy in the workplace. I know I'm about to get all kinds of interesting comments about this. And I'm glad. I have a reason why I don't use empathy in the workplace. I tell my leadership clients to save empathy for their families. Empathy should be reserved for the people in your family that you love. Compassion, however, is better for a leader to be more effective. To be more effective in their leadership practice, it's practicing compassion and not empathy. Now, why are you saying, what do you mean, Denise? Empathy? Why can't I am an empath? Yes, and I am one too. But I reserve empathy for my family, but I bring compassion to the workplace. Because last week when I talked about the brain, the amygdala hijacking the prefrontal cortex. So when we are focused and we are problem solving and we are calm and we are ready to serve our employees, we are using the prefrontal cortex of our mind. But when we are triggered or activated, the amygdala hijacks the brain. That's what's happening in essence, in a nutshell. That's what's happening. So if I have an employee, and I can speak on this because I've had to learn the hard way. When I had an employee in front of me tell me all the craziness happening in her life, going through a divorce, going through her children almost being taken away from her because of some acts that she did and things she did. And now she was faced with some very interesting consequences. And I remembered because I was such an empath, still am, but not in the workplace. But when I was an empath in the workplace, I remembered putting myself in her shoes, which is what empathy sort of means. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, experiencing what they're experiencing, buying into the stories, buying into their emotional deregulation, buying into their mirror neurons, because that is what's happening, whether you like it or not. We are mirroring each other's emotions and state and energy state. And so if I am practicing empathy, do you think I'm going to be able to serve my employee at the level that she deserves and that I deserve? Do you think I'm going to be effective if I am clouded, if my amygdala has hijacked my brain because I have fallen into the empathy trap? I call it a trap. That's why I say empathy should be reserved for the family. But compassion, bring compassion. There is a separation in compassion where you are able to put the person in front of you, and you, as a leader who uses neuroscience backed strategies, who knows what's happening in the brain, you are able to distinguish between your emotions, your brain, and theirs. This is what therapists do, by the way. This is a skill set that therapists and counselors have mastered. The separation so that they can help their client or their patient that's in front of them. Because if not, they'll fall into the empathy trap. Trust me, I know I've tried to take down my therapist with me. I've tried to take down my coaches with me. I've tried to convince them to defend my limitation. I want for them to be my ally in the moment of my story. And guess what? The therapist says, no, I don't think so. I know too much and I'm going to separate myself from what you're telling me because I'm here to serve you. And we leaders aren't doing that for our followers. We leaders are falling into the empathy trap. I'm very passionate about this conversation because when emotional intelligence came out and Daniel Goleman made a big old deal about it, every leader wanted to be an empathetic leader and fall into the empathy trap. And then what happens? You can't serve your followers. You can't serve your organization when your amygdala has hijacked your brain because you're reflecting what that employee has told you. Mirror neurons. This is the neuroscience that's happening in the leader's brain. So, my suggestion is, why don't we look at compassion? It's worked in a great field like psychotherapy and counseling. Why don't we use compassion as leaders and leave empathy for our family members? Listen, I think leaders have higher empathy levels. I really do. Leaders have been we have been in so many different circumstances, situations. We've put ourselves in many challenging circumstances. Like that's just who we are. We put ourselves in all kinds of circumstances, and then we put ourselves in everybody else's shoes. I think, and I haven't seen the research on this, but in my observation and in my personal experience, we have high levels of empathy. But a lot of us fall into that trap with our employees, and I can speak on that because I have fallen into that trap many times as an early, emerging leader. I was someone who fell into the empathy and the stories and the heartache and the issues with my employees, and I was not able to separate myself from their circumstances, which clouded my judgment, which affected the way I led in those circumstances. And so compassion, however, allows you to see the evidence in front of you, to be as objective but still sympathetic in the moment. It's like, okay, I know you're hurting and I can see that. And although I may not understand what your circumstances are, and I do want to support you. So so that I don't fall in the deep end of the pool with you while you're drowning and you're pulling me down with you. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to control the situation because I can only control my brain, and yours seems a little chaotic right now, and I want to calm your nervous system down, and I want to get you to calm your emotions, and let's talk about what's really happening here so that I can better support you. That's effective leadership using neuroscience, specifically compassion over empathy. I know, y'all, I get very excited about not using empathy in the workplace. So that's the second neuroscience leadership principle: compassion and active listening. Never mind empathy, leave that somewhere else. So now the third and final leadership neuroscience leadership principle, I don't even know what to call them, but they are principles that you must apply in your workplace right now. So the third one is building psychological safety. So the person that we can give credit for all of this amazing work in psychological safety is Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson, Harvard Business School professor, has written so much, has done so much work in this field, and it is incredible. And I'm so happy that she has provided such great work for us to follow. And it's psychological safety. It's being able to feel safe to share with our teammates uncomfortable information, challenging information. It's the lack of fear of retaliation or uncivil behavior, right? It's being able to say something and not fear that somebody's going to roll their eyes, or somebody's going to write me a nasty note, or somebody's going to talk bad about me, right? Or undermine me in the conversation. Psychological safety is so important, and it is so underrated. And so many of us talk about it, but we don't even know how to implement. We don't even know where to start with psychological safety. Well, I always want to start with you, leader. How do you define psychological safety for yourself? Right? You may be very comfortable delivering challenging news. You just may be that type of leader. Great. A lot of us aren't that way. A lot of us are not comfortable in our own nervous system. A lot of us need a lot more help and discipline in regulating our emotions. So this is why I want for you to find self-awareness around what is psychological safety for me actually. Can I walk into my CEO's office and deliver uncomfortable information, challenging information? Do I fear retaliation? Do I feel uncivil behavior? How do I feel about it first? Right. Then you can understand for yourself, okay, well, if I feel this way, I wonder if other people on my team feel this way. Or what if I don't feel this way, but maybe, I've noticed some of my teammates and my direct reports, not wanting to speak up for themselves. I've noticed that when one person speaks because they speak so loudly, another one shies away. But they've got a lot of great opinions, but they may be afraid. And so when you start noticing their patterns of behavior, then you can decide to have conversations with them privately, or then set up ways for that so that everybody has a way to contribute to that conversation in that moment. That's what psychological safety looks like, and that is your responsibility to build. And so when incivility happens, when these behaviors come up in our teams, it's because there's no psychological safety. You have done a bad job in creating this culture of safety in this department. And so start looking at you yourself, leader. What makes you feel safe or unsafe in the organization? And then how can you do that with your teammates? So remember, you do the work first before we can then lead these teams and do this help them do this for themselves. That's the thing. That's the whole point, is finding self-awareness around who you are, leader, and how you can use these neuroscience back strategies right now, today, immediately, and then test it on your employees and see how they react to these strategies that I just shared. So these are three very important strategies that you can use right away. So let me go through them very quickly, and then we're going to wrap up our time together, because as always, my 20 minutes turns into double that time. Okay. So the first neuroscience leadership principle is regulating your own emotional responses. So that's your responsibility to do. And be intentional in being the safety net for this team. Right? You are reliable, you are dependable, dare I say predictable. That's who you are. You are the safety net. You will be there for your team so that they can go and take risks, so that they can go and be as effective as they want to be. They want to be innovative, they want to be creative, they want to use their expertise. Isn't that why you hired them? Because of their skill set, because of their KSAs, their knowledge, skills, and abilities. So now be the safety net for them so that they can go and perform at their best. That's your responsibility. Now, and the second neuroscience leadership principle is compassion and active listening. So when you practice compassion, you are able to hear what is being said, the deeper meanings behind what they're saying. Because if you're practicing empathy in this moment, trust me, you're not actively listening. You are falling into the empathy trap with your employee. I know. I said a lot about that already. The third neuroscience leadership principle is building psychological safety. That is your responsibility, leader. You want a team that feels like they can trust you because you are the safety net. And whenever they're on that tightrope, they can fall and get back up and fall and get back up, and they can share uncomfortable situations. They're able to express how they're feeling at that time. They're able to share their ideas without being ridiculed, without being interrupted, without an eye roll. Right? That's your job, is to build psychological safety. Now, those are three neuroscience backed strategies that we leaders must implement right away. This is how we become models of civility in the workplace. This is how we help our teams and how we help our organizations. So I hope you found those three strategies so helpful. Now, I want to share with you that because of the response from our first leadership, or our last leadership training on reactive versus proactive leaders, the excitement about neuroscience and leadership. You want to know more about how to leverage that 3-pound organ. You want to know more about how to utilize this beautiful brain that you have. And so we have designed a micro credential course inside Amplify Leadership just for you. Because those of you who are active leaders, who are actively working on improving and growing and developing, this is what you've asked for and this is what you deserve. Now, this isn't just for any leader. Trust me, not all leaders care like you do. But those that do, and those that are watching this, you are the ones who want to leverage this incredible discipline because of this incredible brain that you have. So I'm going to invite you into Amplify Leadership. Amplify Leadership is our monthly leadership training and development program. It is monthly, so you can cancel anytime. We're not here to hold you down. You use us in the season that you're in, and come back, anytime you need us. We do monthly master classes, we do group coaching, we do strategy sessions. I've created a undated perpetual planner for our leaders to help you rewire your brain for leadership. It's an incredible 90-day planner. With so many more things that you're going to want to go check out. Go to drdenisesimpson.com/amplify, because if I help you simplify your leadership, and that's the whole goal of my curriculum inside Amplify Leadership. If I simplify leadership for you, you will then go amplify your impact. That's the whole point of Amplify Leadership. And in Amplify Leadership, we have these micro credential courses that you can only get inside Amplify Leadership. So if you're an active member, you get to do these micro credential courses. And we're doing this new course just for you called Brain-Based Leadership, Science-Driven Strategies for Impactful Leadership. It's all neuroscience. We have a great curriculum we designed. We're going to roll that out throughout several weeks. So you'll be in the program with us every single month, benefiting from all the other incredible master classes and things that we have for you to go amplify your impact. But you will also be able to gain this micro credential course certification their credentials. That's important. You get to show your employer that you are actively learning and developing. And we've designed this very special neuroscience based leadership curriculum just for our Amplify leadership clients. So if you are interested, now is the time. We start in November and you do not want to miss. There's only a handful of us in there at the time of this recording. Who knows where we'll be at the end of the year? I mean, who knows? But you're going to want to be an early adopter. You're going to want to be in there now to secure your space. So go to drdenise.com/amplify because I cannot wait to serve you in there, dear leader. All right, leader, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found these 3 neuroscience leadership principles valuable. I know you did, and you're going to go put these into practice right away. And then let me know if I'm going to see you inside Amplify Leadership. So drdenisesimpson.com/amplify. You're going to want to go there right now and get in and tell us you're there because we want to support you. And can't wait to serve you with this new micro credential. All righty. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. And for those who are going to watch the replay, we'll see you all inside Amplify and next week. See you soon.